Bonjour, my name is David DeVere. I'm a wine educator and traveler, and you're watching Savvy Nomad TV. This is the Voix d'eau edition. This is episode 6 of Traveling French Canals. We're continuing our discussion on how to buy a boat in France. Although really it's a discussion about how to buy a boat anywhere in Europe. And one of the key concepts, well, one of 3 of the key concepts you need to consider is registration of the vessel, taxes, and, insurance. Okay, so you've probably done all the steps that I had suggested. Let's say you did, and if you didn't, well, then maybe you want to watch the rest of this playlist and follow some of those steps. Step number 1 is renting a boat somewhere in Europe. You've got France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, Italy, Ireland, and the UK to choose from. That will give you a good idea of what canal boat cruising is like. I suggest that's a good starting area. Then you've decided, okay, I do want to buy a boat. You've watched the video on size and features, and okay, you picked the boat that's best for you, whether you're a liveaboard or you're going to be an occasional cruiser and take friends and family on trips. Whatever it is, you've chosen. Then you've gone to Yacht Focus and you've found a boat. Now, most of the boats that are really items that you are looking to buy are probably in France or Belgium or the Netherlands or possibly even somewhere in the UK. And there are some pitfalls with buying a boat in each one of those places, namely because you need to register the vessel somewhere. So let's talk about registration. When shopping for a boat, you're going to find most of the best opportunities in the Netherlands. The Dutch make high quality, beautiful vessels, and honestly, compared to prices in the United States, the Pacific Northwest or the Northeast or Florida, these vessels are well priced. For what you get, they don't cost a lot. It's really surprising, and the quality of workmanship is very high. But you can also shop for boats in France or Belgium. And in France, there's one cautionary area. If you go down to the south of France, you start to get a syndrome where boats get a little more worn out because they're sitting and baking in the sun longer than the ones that are up in the Netherlands under the cloudy skies getting rained on all the time. Now, sometimes wet, rainy boats isn't so good if they leak, but often a boat that gets rained on enough and gets washed enough, it's going to be a good deal. It's going to be a fair used boat. And you want a used boat, unless you have some extra money to spend. And I'm going to talk about that when it comes to taxes. Now, let's say you find a boat on Yacht Focus and it's in the Netherlands. What do you do for registration? Well, first of all, in the Netherlands, you don't need to register a boat. Go to the brokerage, pay the broker, pick up the keys, off you go. Done deal. However, there's a little bit of a catch with that, because to go to Germany, to go to Belgium, to go to France, you need to be registered. You have to have a boat registration. So unless you want to stay just in the Netherlands on your boat, and there's plenty of opportunities there, you need to register it. So what do the Dutch do? Well, they have this thing called an International Certificate of Pleasurecraft, an ICP. It's not that expensive, but here's the catch. It's only for Dutch residents or citizens. So if you're buying a boat in the Netherlands and you're not Dutch, well, forget it. That ICP won't work. So what else do you do? There's got to be some way to do this, isn't there? Yes, there technically is. And there's a thing in Holland called the cadaster. Now, the cadaster, I believe it's a Latin word, and it means something like head count. Anyway, the cadaster is used to essentially dictate who owns what property. It's really for homes or farmland or commercial property and to apply mortgages to that. It's a list of the mortgage. In America, we would call that title. And you can have a title list on to a boat, because in Holland, a wet, watery place, they have put mortgages on vessels. This probably dates back to the 1600s, where people would all buy a share of a boat and they would hope that it would go out, gather some spices, and their ship would come in and they would make money. This was listed in a book called The Cadaster. You can still get your boat put on the cadaster. And in fact, if you buy a boat with someone who has had their boat on the cadaster, you need to get their name off it and your name on it, because it really shows who the owner is. You don't want to be cruising around on a boat that somebody else owns that you've paid for. Bad idea. So that acts like a registration system for the Netherlands. You can buy a boat and you can put your name on the cadaster and you can take it throughout inland waterways in Europe. But there's a catch, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, what about Belgium? To put a boat in registration in Belgium, it has to be 50% owned by either a resident or a citizen that has an address in Belgium. So if you're an American like me, that's not really a viable option. Or you could be Canadian, Australian, New Zealander, you get it. What about France? Well, in France, there's a registration system. There's letters that go on the side of your boat, but you need an address in France. So tricky. So how do you get around the address bit? Well, in France, your marina can serve as your address. You're probably going to buy the boat somewhere. In my case, I bought a boat in Strasbourg, and I keep it at Europe Boat Trading in Strasbourg. And that gets listed in my registration documents with the prefecture. I have to change the letters, essentially the registration numbers on the side of the boat, but otherwise, that's it. I've bought a boat in France, and I've registered it in France, and I can take it to anywhere in Europe. Great. Now in Holland, that's the same deal. You can use your marina address, and you can put your name on the cadaster. Now, a couple little things I learned about researching the cadaster. One, you can't put a corporation on the cadaster. And two, you probably don't want to have multiple names add to the cadaster. So if you have multiple owners of your boat, you shouldn't really add a whole bunch of names, because every time you add a name, it adds a fee. The cost of adding a boat to the cadaster starts at about €1,000 and can go north of that. There are some online services which I would be very suspect of, but you can make your own choice, that will charge you around €2,000 to put your name on the cadaster, or even register you in Poland. But be very careful. I don't think that sounds very official. In Belgium, if you are 50% Belgian or an address have an address in Belgium, it's going to cost around €500. And in France, it's free. It doesn't cost anything. Maybe a €75 broker fee, but really the broker built that into the price. We didn't pay extra to register our boat in Strasbourg. So that's how you do it. But I know you're saying, what about the UK? You left that out. Well, let's talk about taxes. Okay, the United Kingdom. Well, if you'll remember back a few years ago, the United Kingdom had a referendum vote, and slightly more than 50% of the population voted for Brexit. That's the problem, Brexit. Because now you have a thing called value-added tax, VAT. So if you bought a boat in the United Kingdom and you wanted to bring it to Holland and register it on the cadaster, the Dutch would ask you, have you had VAT paid? Maybe it has. Maybe this is a boat originally from Holland and the VAT was paid by the original owner many, many moons ago. Great, no problem. But if this is a new boat or a boat that has never been imported into Europe, because that's what you're doing, the VAT would be due, and value-added tax is generally around 20%. Wow. Yeah, 20%. So if your boat's worth 100 grand, you owe them 20 grand. If it's worth 200 grand, you owe them 40 grand. And it works the other way around. If you take a boat from Europe and you take it to the UK and you haven't paid VAT, you're essentially importing it into the UK, then you need to pay them, you guessed it, 20% or thereabouts. Gets kind of expensive. And that's what Brexit did for boaters between England and France, between Scotland and Holland, between Ireland and Wales. I mean, come on. Anyway, I digress. Each country makes their own choices and lives with them appropriately. So, as someone looking or shopping for boats, you would have to think very carefully about that boat that you're purchasing in the United Kingdom if you wanted to take it to continental Europe. Now, in Europe, most boats are used boats, and that's really what you want because the VAT will have been paid by the original commissioner, the person who orders the boat and builds the boat, and that's super duper great. Now, if you're buying a sailing yacht and it's in Croatia and it was in charter, the VAT was probably never paid. You have to be very careful there. But I'm talking about an inland waterway barge, and so don't worry about it. You don't have to. That's VAT, and that's the issue that they're struggling with in the United Kingdom. Okay, if your boat has 2 VAT statuses, it can go back and forth across the channel as many times as it wants, and it doesn't care. If it doesn't, it can stay in Europe for 18 months, and in the United Kingdom, I'm not sure. I think it's 6 months, but you need to be careful about that. All right, let's talk about insurance. Before I get to insurance, there's one little sub thing on registration I want to talk about. Sometimes some foreign nationals, Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, decide that it's easier to register their boat with their country of origin. So I've heard of some Americans taking the boat to and registering it with the U.S. Coast Guard. That's a bunch of extra paperwork. It does come with an annual renewal, and I'm not actually sure it's even legal. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's very gray. Or I've heard of some Americans going to their state DMVs, Department of Motor Vehicles, and registering a boat. I don't really know why you'd want to do that. In fact, in the state of Minnesota where I live, it's prohibited. You can't actually register a boat that isn't in the state. I know in the state of Washington, if the boat doesn't reside in the state, you can't register it. Plus, these states charge taxes on it. Why would you want to register a boat and pay a state tax on, and then an annual tax on that, when you could just register it in France for free? Okay, anyway, maybe the Australians haven't got it all figured out. I don't know. But your boat can have a VAT status and it can have a registration status or a flagged status. Those two things can be separate. So think about it. Now, when it comes to insurance, again, there used to be a number of brokers that were available to European waterway people from the UK. But again, Brexit screwed that up. You're not going to find a broker that can insure someone in France for a vessel that they own. I've tried. There are a number of international brokerage firms in the UK, and now they have to scratch their heads and think about the regulations. So in my experience, I got a French insurer. There you go. I joined the ANPEI, Association Nationale Penseurs au Intérieur. Woof, big acronym. But the ANPEI is a group of French inland waterway boaters, and they have an agreement with Cap Marine Insurance out of Nantes, and there you go. I emailed Fanny, and she emailed me back, said, give me the particulars of your boat, and I bought insurance. I'm going to have an upcoming video on all the costs I have incurred in buying a boat in my first year of ownership, what that has entailed. If your boat's in Holland or registered in Holland, I think you could probably find a Dutch insurer, but be careful. Again, size matters, and a lot of these bigger barges are going to carry a lot more weight in insurance, and some insurers are turning away from them. All right, one last thing I want to talk about, and that's how to pay for boats. When you're buying a boat, there's lots of little bits and bobs that you got to pay for. You've got the down payment, you've got the survey, maybe you're going to pay for painting, maybe you need to pay for the marina. And in Europe, it's very common for people to give you their bank routing number and then zip them some money. But we don't really do that here. I mean, we can send a wire, but it usually costs 20 bucks. So that's not always the best thing. Plus, sometimes, like your little local bank's not going to give you the best exchange rate. So what do? And I'm not sponsored by these people at all. I just use them. There's a company called Wise, and they transfer money from point A to point B. You can set up a Wise account easily online, and you can pay with a debit card or an ACH transfer. And for little things $10,000 or less, I use Wise to pay for things for the boat. So I've used it to pay for our surveyor, I used it to pay for our marina fees, I used it to pay for the down payment. And then when it came to paying the majority of the money for the boat, we had a Wells Fargo account where we used that, and we got a better exchange rate than we could using our smaller local bank. And Wise really had an onerous amount of paperwork that they wanted to transfer the large amount of money. So, which they said because we didn't have a relationship with them. I guess they were worried that we were smugglers or launderers or crooks or something. Anyway, Wells Fargo, we had a relationship with them, and so they transferred the money to the broker's account, and it went swimmingly. All right. Whew. Did you keep up with all that? So this is a cautionary tale video. You need to be very particular in considering all the little ramifications of your purchase. Can you register the boat? Where are you going to register the boat? What's the VAT status of the boat? And can you insure the darn thing once you buy it? Because you probably do want to have insurance. Technically, in France, insurance isn't required. But there's a lot of boats around, and if you smash into the lock gates and you break them, then you're going to be on the hook for that. So you need insurance. All these things are the back end, the non-exciting, non-wonderful part of buying a boat. The shopping part is the easy, fun part, and then figuring out how much money to spend. That's kind of the easy, fun part too. But then you need to register, figure out the tax status, and then get insurance. Okay, I hope this video has helped you out. If it has, please give me a thumbs up. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I got lots of odd content on notebooks, wine, and boating. Yeah, because these are my interests, and so I thought maybe there's someone else who'd be interested in it too. Next week, I'm going to give you a tour of our new boat. Yep, well, it's new to us anyway. Next week, I'm going to give you a tour of the Relaxed Companion. Until then, I say à tout à l'heure and cheers.